All right. Welcome to Career Pathways and Youth and Young Adult Mental Health. Understanding the roles of peers, social workers, researchers, and mental health clinicians. Welcome to session 4. Today, we are specifically talking about mental health clinician roles. My name is Victoria Eckert. I am from Youth Move National and part of the NTAC, the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. I am on the Youth and Young Adult Transformation team, as well as the Partnerships for Systems Transformation team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Boatwright. I'm also a part of Youth Move National as a youth programs coordinator and a part of the NTAC Youth and Young Adults team. So this material was prepared for NTAC under a cooperative agreement for SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. This is public content. This can be used and copied without permission from SAMHSA or other authors.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. Hi again, Victoria Eckert. I also use she, her pronouns from Youth Move National. Very excited to have all of you here today. And Gia?
Hello, everyone. Gia Kelly here. I am also with the NTAC team. I'm employed by Change Matrix, and I serve on the infant and early childhood team and formerly on the youth and young adult team. Glad to be here and welcome everyone.
So today's agenda, we're kind of already walking through the welcome and NTAC overview. You'll have a chance to meet your presenters, go have a brief overview of the career pathways for mental health clinician roles. You'll have a chance to meet your facilitator and the expert panelists. There'll be a quick this panel discussion, and then time for questions and answers from you guys. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to drop your questions and comments in the chat box along the way, or hold them for the questions and next steps. All right, quick NTAC overview. Next slide, please. So NTAC currently has about 7 key partners. That includes CARS, Center for Child and Human Development, Change Matrix, Texas Institute for Excellence in Mental Health, MedStar, Georgetown University, American Pediatrics, Academy of Pediatrics, and both the youth and family representation being Youth Move National and FREDLA. So NTAC, within the NTAC team, we are divided into different teams that focus on areas like school-based mental health. The other thing that I did briefly wanted to mention was the work that this series is the work of the Youth and Young Adults team. And so we have been working collaboratively with our entire team to kind of make sure that these series, the 4-part career pathway series, has happened. Okay, moving into the NTAC goal. Our goal is to make sure that youth, young adults, families with emotional behavioral health needs have access to evidence-based, recovery-based services that are in a well-coordinated system of care.
All right, great. Thank you, Jasmine. Eve, you can advance the slide, please. Just a really quick overview as we wrap up some information about NTAC, the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. This is who we serve at the center. As you can see here, we represent information and resources all across the country, but our key cross-sector audiences include states and local agency leaders, the mental health workforce, social workers, clinicians, home visitors, etc., primary care providers, school workforce, community-based providers, peer supervisors, and family and youth partners. So our goal through NTAC is to provide robust evidence-based resources for across the country for these groups, and as well as system of care grantees and healthy transitions grantees. And as you can see here, this slide is a wonderful representation of our no cost training and technical assistance and resources that we offer through the center. So it's everything from individual consultation, if there's a specific resource needed or an ask that's pretty quick to be able to be answered through email or conversation. Sometimes we host peer learning exchanges, so coming together, sharing resources with either like-minded folks or folks in similar roles or positions doing similar work. Sometimes it's customized coaching, training academies, communities of practice. 5 Things Digest are very brief e-newsletter resources based on specific topics that we like to send out through email listservs to give you a robust information in a very short amount of text. We also offer podcasts, practical tools, and more. So we absolutely encourage everyone on this call to visit our website down at the bottom left of the screen to find out what we offer, what is available at no cost to you. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Gia Kelly to tell us why we're here today and why this series is so important in helping youth and young adults recognize all of the possibilities in the behavioral health workforce. Gia?
Thank you so much, Victoria. And yes, the reason why we're here is first and foremost that there is a shortage in the mental health field. And so we wanted to create a space for youth and young adults and as well as other supportive adults to hear perspectives of those who are actually doing the work, to hear what their journey was like, and to get advice on what educational pursuits that might be helpful, because as young people, you might have ideas of what you want to do, but might not know how to get there. And so that's really what this Career Pathway series has been about. And we have gone through several different, from peers to social workers, and you name it. And now we're going to focus on mental health clinicians, which is a very diverse aspect, but much needed. And so I also wanted to note that the Generation Next piece is a concept developed by Youth Move National, which demonstrates that in order to sustain any youth movement, as youth advocates transition to advocates for youth, it is essential that the next generation of young people who will become youth advocates are continuously engaged. So this really helps with that Generation Next concept. And also it's just a space to be able to listen in and to hopefully be inspired. So that's really our why for today. And so next slide, please. And so we wanted to just quickly go over some of the strengths of a mental health clinician. And these are some of kind of the core things that we think, if you're going to be a good clinician, because we know there's clinicians, but everybody's not good, but we're going to assume that everyone's good. But if you want to be good in the role of a clinician, these are some of the things that you might want to, that you need and that you might want to build and develop as you're pursuing this career path. And so problem solving skills, flexibility, excellent listening skills, right? Because you're definitely having to listen a whole lot more than you actually speak. And I'm sure our panelists will talk a little bit more about that. Having having an equity lens, really understanding why equity, diversity, inclusion, and such is very, very important to the work. Having an understanding of your personal biases as an individual and how those implicit and explicit biases can get in the way, right? How it shapes the way that you view others. There's also a need for patience and perseverance, perceptiveness, right? You have to be able to take good care of yourself and in the form of self-care, which is not on here, but is super, super important. As well as good emotional regulation skills. So these are just some of the things that we think is important as you think about becoming a mental health clinician. The other thing, as we go to the next slide, that I want to point out is that a lot of the language on the next slide is really talking about those who desire to go into the area of psychology. But if you've been a part of our other panels, you'll realize that a mental health clinician, there's many paths, right? Psychology is one way. And so we have those that represent psychology, but there's also licensed mental health counselors and licensed marriage and family therapists and licensed clinical social workers who are also mental health clinicians. So it's just not psychologists and psychiatrists, although they play an incredible role in the behavioral health arena. And so on this slide, you'll see just some of the pathways, right? Some of the things that are necessary. And so some of the steps include earning your bachelor degree, and then also a master's degree. In order to become a clinician, you will need at least a master's degree in order to be licensed, in order to get the clinical training. And so again, there's a vast amount of degrees that you can earn. But if you want to become a psychologist, then you'll need to pursue a doctoral degree, either a PsyD, PsyD, which is a clinical and counseling oriented degree, or a PhD, which is more research oriented. So yeah, you would need to have a doctorate in psychology, not a master's. You would need to have a doctorate in psychology to do that. You want to get an internship and a postdoctoral opportunity to gain some hands-on training, because education is great, but you have to also get out there. So all of these clinical programs will give you that opportunity to get out there in the community and really interface with those who are challenged by mental health, families and children and youth and adults. And so also thinking about licensure requirements, all of these clinician roles, whether whatever one you take, you will need to be licensed because it is it's very serious work that's happening when you are helping those with mental health challenges and dealing with very difficult and sensitive topics. And then also being able to keep that licensure updated. So having to keep up with your CEUs and licensure requirements every year or every 2 years. So those are just some things. And again, our speakers will go into detail and be able to answer specific questions. And so the last slide is really of this piece is really around the roles, the various roles, as I kind of already showed you all. But there's numerous roles within the clinician space. And so we see the licensed clinical social worker, we see clinical consultants, we see psychologists, we see therapists, we see marriage and family therapists. We also see faith-based leaders who are licensed to be counselors. We see clinical supervisors. So all of these really make up the various roles within the clinical space. So yeah, I want to hand this now over to our facilitator for our panel, Annie Stafford, who's done a phenomenal job in all of our panels. And so I want to hand it over to Annie. Annie is a certified peer specialist. She goes by the pronouns of she, her, and she has been involved with the mental health systems, both personally and professionally. We can go to the next slide, I'm sorry, so they can see her beautiful photo. Both professionally and personally for over 10 years. Annie currently facilitates continuing education trainings for county mental health workers on various mental health topics. She serves on various committees to propel systems change forward. And she's also the co-founder and director of her own mental health nonprofit organization, Tend to Hope. You go, girl. Formerly, Annie has worked as a youth consultant on the National Council for Mental Wellbeing's Connected project. And she is committed to utilizing her lived experience to act as an advocate, and educator, and a support to young people navigating the mental health system. So I'm going to hand it over to Annie to continue our conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to be here with everybody. I love doing these panels and hearing all the great insight that everybody has to say. So just the way today's session is going to run is that this is going to be a facilitated panel discussion that highlights the unique experience of everybody on the panel today, just in hopes that it might inspire anybody on the call to want to pursue a career as a mental health clinician in whatever capacity that looks like. So as we keep going, we're just going to introduce the panelists here, and I believe we can flip to today's panelist slide. Yep, perfect. And just after I read the bio, I would just ask that our panelists just say hello, maybe one thing that they're excited about for today, and their preferred pronouns. So we're going to start with Michael Roveris, and Michael holds a Master's of Social Work degree from Southern University at New Orleans and a bachelor's degree from the University of Kansas in Broadcast Management. Before joining NTAC, Michael worked in over 5 countries providing counseling and consultation to military personnel and their families while stationed abroad. On many of these assignments, Michael enjoyed working as a consultant to the staff and families of the child development centers. In addition to this work, Michael has directed 2 systems of care grants. He has served as an assistant professor of infant, child, and adolescent psychiatry at the Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center, worked as a paid consultant to the children's television workshop, The Producers of Sesame Street. That's awesome. And as a senior trainer at 0 to 3, the National Center for Infants, Toddlers, and Families. Michael is also currently a national trainer for the Brazelton Touchpoint Center at Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard. And Michael, if you just want to say a quick hello.
Hello there to everyone. Golly, that sounds like a nice guy. But I think it illustrates that the path to where I am today is one that certainly wouldn't be considered the traditional path, or that I always wanted to do this work. And I'd like to be able to share some of my insights as we get into the discussion.
And moving on is Jeffrey Bostic. Jeff is a child psychiatrist who mostly works with and in schools. He started as a teacher in Texas public schools, then worked in a large school district as a researcher before going to medical school and training in child psychiatry. When he finished training at Mass General in Boston, he remained there and works still in about 50 school districts in the Northeast. He's now a professor at Georgetown in DC and teaches and trains medical students and residents, and works in 30 schools in the DC area. He has also participated in school mental health training and programs in Ukraine, China, South Korea, Israel, Chile, Colombia, Kuwait, Egypt, and this year in Poland and Saudi Arabia. Thank you. And Jeff, if you want to say hi.
Hi. Thanks, Annie. I'm glad to be here with you guys today. Like Mike, my path to getting to where I'm at is not following like what you would think is the conventional path. So we'll talk about that. But I'm just interested in what you guys are interested in. That is the people attending this and what we can do to be useful to you as far as any like insights that Mike alluded to that might help you like figure out kind of what you might want to do, you know, in pursuit of your directions.
And next we have Shai Porter, and Dr. Porter is a relationship scientist with expertise in couple relationships, perinatal mental health, and the intersection of the two. As a clinician, she specializes and works with couples, pregnant and postpartum women, alone or with their partners, contending with perinatal mental health concerns, and adolescent and adult individuals. Dr. Porter is clinically trained as a marriage and family therapist and holds a PhD in family science, the study of close interpersonal relationships and all the macro and micro level factors that influence them, with an emphasis in maternal and child health. She is an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Georgetown University School of Medicine and MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. And if you would like to say hello.
Hello, it's so good to be here and to see all of you. I use she, her pronouns, by the way. I would echo what Mike and Jeff have already said. The one difference I will add, though, is that I went straight through with school, no breaks, straight through the PhD. And so that's a bit of a different experience that I'm happy to talk about. But thrilled to be invited to this, thrilled to be sharing this space with you all today.
And finally, we have Carla Santiago. And Dr. Carla Santiago is from Ponce, Puerto Rico. She graduated in 2008 from Ponce Health Science University, formerly Ponce School of Medicine, with a degree in clinical psychology. Dr. Santiago has been leading the clinical department at Sur Familia Inc., a nonprofit organization in Georgia, since 2019. Before joining Sur Familia, she worked in private practice from 2013 to 2019 at Marietta, Georgia. And Carla, if you want to say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this panel. I'm very excited to share about my experience, and it's kind of similar to Shai. I went through college and university soon after graduating from high school, nonstop, no breaks at all. But it's been an amazing experience so far. So, and I go by she and her.
So yeah, we've met our panelists, and now it's kind of time to dive into what we're all here for today. So as we officially start with the panel, the first question I have is, I'm wondering if everybody or whoever's inclined could talk a little bit about your current role, who you support or serve, your length of time in the role, and some of the typical duties involved in your position. And whoever wants to start.
I could start talking about my experience, yes, working as the clinical manager for a nonprofit organization. It's been an amazing experience. I've been working very close to the community, and something very particular about Sur Familia is that we are one of the few agencies that offer mental health services and psychoeducational workshops to Hispanic families in the state, and our services are provided in Spanish. I also supervise the clinical staff, and the clinical staff includes social workers, LPC, and counselors in training. And I also work doing psychological evaluations for candidates to immigration status.
Okay, and I will share that I work as a team lead in the transformation programs that were explained in the earlier slides, the infant and early child mental health division of the transformation team. And the one thing I will say is that as I think about my career as a social worker and working at university and doing policy, there are times when you're taking away from the field, from the ability to get down on the floor with children and teachers at centers and doing that work. And there's that part that I really miss and sometimes wish I could do more of. But the opportunity to have discussions and to talk about strategies and helping other organizations is one that I thoroughly enjoy. But what I'm saying is that at times when you develop and you have a lot of success, that sometimes that means that you may change your focus and do more administrative work. And so it's a balance.
I don't really have much more to add beyond what Annie very helpfully mentioned in my bio, but I can talk a little bit about my day-to-day. So as a faculty member in an academic medical setting, basically therapy is a part of my job. When I was thinking about going into academia post-PhD, I conceptualized it as working as a professor and then having a private practice on the side. But when you're in academic medicine, you basically get to see patients as part of your day-to-day, which is awesome. And then within my faculty responsibilities, I teach, I do research, I supervise the medical fellows and residents who are in our department. And then there are also a ton of cool opportunities to collaborate with lots of different organizations like INTACT, that's on here today. And you also just get to meet a ton of really cool and interesting and smart people Jeff is in my department with me, and so I have the pleasure of interacting with him pretty often. And it's really great to be in a setting where you have the academic exercises that you want available, whether that's, like teaching or writing a grant, doing some other research, and you also get to connect with patients in a very real.
Yeah, and I like Shai's approach to this. Like, what do you do on a daily basis? So I can just tell you, like, Mondays are my days to like see kids and to do evaluations in a variety of schools. A lot of it's done virtually, like with kids in the Northeast. Some of it's done, with kids in DC as well. Tuesday is typically the day that we meet. Our Georgetown groups all get together and we see patients in the afternoon, but in the morning, Shai and I and others meet. And if nobody points this out, somebody should ask Shai about this. She's like the best at like what's cool and vogue and new that's going on, like podcasts that are like great both for clinical stuff, but also just for like keeping up with like what's going on with like young people and stuff like that. So some of us are a little bit older, but anyway, so she's our conduit to that. So the point is that interface, that collegial kind of collaboration that occurs within an academic department is just awesome. So it's Shai and a number of other people at Georgetown that we interact with. Wednesdays and Thursdays are mostly done, frankly, for the state of Maryland. We do a bunch of stuff right now. We're trying to eliminate restraints and seclusion in schools across the country, frankly, in juvenile justice places as well. That's not the way we like to see people treated. So there's a lot of effort there at like identifying what the best practices are, implementing things in a variety of places, and then measuring what's going on so that there's science to support, like you can do X instead of Y, so that we kind of make progress. And then Fridays again are another day where we kind of keep up with like clinical matters and then move forward again with what are we doing again as a system to make sure that we're addressing what's most important and ensure that people have access to care. So that's kind of like what goes on a week. There'll be some other things that we'll talk about throughout.
And our next question that we have here is, how did you get into the role that you're working in now? Any driving factors that led you to where you are, any personal journeys that might have, just kind of, how you found yourself here. And then specifically the second portion of the question is how your geographic location plays into the role you're in. And certainly whoever feels compelled to answer, nobody feel the pressure of it. But anybody who's ready.
Well, I held a private practice in the same city that I started working as a clinical manager for this nonprofit. And as one of the very few clinicians that are bilingual in the area, I used to receive a lot of referrals from this organization. So I knew the organizations since before I started working with them, and having, seeing the opportunity to get more involved with the community and giving more than just staying in a private practice and seeing whatever comes to my practice. So I made the switch in my career and said, okay, I want to try to be, to expand my skills to cover those needs that are for this Hispanic family in the community in the area. So that was motivated me to switch from private practice to be in more collaborative and community involvement, as I am doing right now in the organization that I work with.
I think you may have to call on us, Annie. Otherwise, we'll like sit here and like look like which one of us should do it now. But I'm glad to jump in on this one. So here's the fun part. The whole fun part is like, well, so boss, did you know like when you were 9 that you were going to want to do this? No. When I was 9, I wanted to be an NFL quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys or some such thing. But you can look at me. I can't stand up here and be helpful. But you can look at me and go like, that's not going to happen. And so the time I was like 15 or 16, I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So then it was like, I had my second best idea. It was like, well, I will be a rock and roll star. I'll be like some musician and play like in bands or whatever. Now, this is the relevant part. So the point was I put my heart and soul and passion into that, and I attained the great vista of being an incredibly mediocre musician. But I was mediocre enough to be able to get into college via that. Nobody where I came from, I grew up in a small town in Texas. We had 7 people go to college out of 250 or so that graduated from our one and only high school. 3 of us went because we were musicians that liked each other and played together in high school and were all good enough to like make that next step. So I went to college. I had no interest in medicine at all. I went through my undergraduate degree going, what's the easiest degree that I can do so I can play music at night? And they were like, well, you can be like in education. I was like, that'll work. So I ended up being an English teacher while I played musical stuff at night. Well, same as when I was 9 years old, how trying to be an NFL-like quarterback, not happening. By the time I was 25, I was like, yeah, I'm not ever going to really be able to feed myself as a musician. You know, I had friends that, you know, were my roommates and stuff. And I'm like, God, they're really like talented, good players. And they went on and did bigger and better things. So then I was like, I'm gonna have to do something else. So I was a teacher for several years. And then I stumbled upon medicine and it was like, huh, this is interesting and intriguing. And it looks pretty good. So I had to go back and take the prerequisites to get into medical school. You have to take 2 years of biology, 2 years of chemistry. And I don't mean like a whole bunch, but you have to have like 4 courses, not that many in chemistry, 4 in biology, 2 in physics. That's really about it. So you can have any major you want. Now, this is the big part. So I did all that stuff. No one, maybe I won't get into school. I did, or med school. Eventually did when I was like 30, right? So it wasn't something I figured out when I was young. And then of all the crazy things from Texas, I got to Harvard. And the question is, God, boss, how did you jump to Harvard? You must have been really smart. Nope. Back when I was 17, trying to be a good musician, it turned out that that's what mattered to the guy that was admitting people into the child psychiatry program in 1994 when I went to Harvard. He was a wannabe keyboard player and he needed a drummer. And they looked up and it was like, God, you played with so-and-so. And so you're probably at least decent, better than most of us are. And so that's how I got in. Serious. It's not like always the things that you would imagine are going to be important. But this is why I'm saying this. Put your heart and soul into whatever you're doing now. We look for passion. People look for like perseverance. They look for people who work hard at stuff. So bloom where you're planted, relish those things that you do like that, because those really turn out to be valuable. Those are the ways that you actually oftentimes sync up with people down the road when there's a bunch of people interested, like in getting into a position or a place that move you ahead. So please don't feel weird about wherever you come from. Big prideful identity in that. And I'll make jokes at a later question here about other things that you end up doing job-wise that occur because of peripheral interests or places that you come from or cultures that you come from that turn out to be incredibly relevant. Biggest thing is you never want to be ashamed or feel like you're going to be held back because of that. I'm telling you, there's going to be a time and a place where wherever you come from, whatever you've done with heart and soul is going to serve you well.
I don't know how to follow that up. that was awesome. I don't have a particularly cool story. I just kind of kept plugging on and pushing through with school. I knew that I wanted to work with couples. Relationships fascinate me. They continue to all of these years later. And that's how I ended up in marriage and family therapy. But I also knew that I wanted a terminal degree and I wanted to, do research and do couples research, do perinatal research. And my PhD, I studied a lot of maternal and child health related things, which is kind of how I ended up in child and adolescent psychiatry. In my position now, it's really cool that I'm in this child and adolescent psychiatry division, but I also bridge the adult psychiatry division because I work with couples and women who are pregnant and postpartum, as well as people who are adolescents or just regular adults or parents having a hard time. But I think, so Annie, the latter half of your question was about geographical location. And for me, it was important to be in an area where there were people who looked like me, it was a diverse setting, and a place where there were lots of cool opportunities. I finished school when I was pretty young because I went all the way through and I didn't want to go into the middle of nowhere in the country. I wanted to be somewhere relatively urban where the suburbs are accessible, but where I could do a whole bunch of millennial stuff. And DC was great and perfect for that. But I also could have made it in New York, where I went to undergrad, or basically anywhere along either of the coasts. But DC has felt perfect because of its access to all sorts of places up and down the coast, and also just being a very, very diverse and fun city. So for me, I think the bottom line on geographical location was to just not end up in, I don't know, somewhere where there weren't people who looked like me, or where the East Coast, northeastern part of the coast, particularly, where that vibe was not appreciated. So here I stayed.
You know, one of the things that strikes me as I listen to Jeff and to Shai is that there's that common theme of having an interest in other people and being flexible. You know, you can't be a good musician unless you're able to join in on a jam session. I'm from New Orleans, so that's how I have to look at it, is that concept of you play music with others, and so you join in or you listen and then you follow. Shai talks about, you know, this is what she knew she wanted to do. And one of the things about me is that I really fought being a social worker and a clinician. I wanted to be a journalist. And I can remember times in my life where people would tell me, you'd make a great social worker. And I'd be like, what? I was just, my uncle died young of colon cancer. And his 10-year-old son, my cousin, I was explaining death to him, and the social worker happened to be listening, and she was like, you have it. And so there are people that I'm convinced that have this innate ability to be there for others. You know, many of us, probably not me, but could make a ton of money in business with the knowledge or the time that we have invested in our education. But what sets us apart is that there's that real desire to help others, or to allow other people to know that they've been heard. And that has little to do with the letters behind your name, and more to do with your ability to be present, to be empathetic, and to be able to share back with people their value. And so I think if you're one of those people who have those skills and you've been told, hey, you would be really good at this, it's calling you.
Those are amazing answers. Thank you all for sharing all of your insight there. And as we move on, our next question are, what are some of the different types of degrees or level of education or training that are needed for the role that you're in? And we've touched on that a little bit, kind of what the suggested level of education would be, but if anybody would be willing to expand on in your particular role, how education and that level impacts your status, that would be great. So Jeff, I'm gonna see your suggestion and raise you one, and yeah, maybe if you could start for us.
Sure, I'm glad to go. So here's the important part. People are like, oh my God, I need to get into the best college ever. And so I should start really doing stuff when I'm like 5 years old or whatever, to like optimize my chances to get into the best school so I can ever get into like then graduate school or medical school or whatever. No, you don't. The bottom line is that, again, put your heart and soul into doing well wherever you are. It is totally cool and fine to go to junior college. I don't care what anybody else tells you. And then after you finish a couple of years there, to go to regular, quote unquote, bachelor's degree kind of colleges and finish it up there, because at the end of that time, you're going to have two things. You're going to have a transcript, and people like people who do well. So if you get good grades, that really helps no matter where you're at. And the second thing is, if you're going to go to medical school or graduate school, you're going to take the same test as everybody else who wants to go to graduate school or who wants to go to medical school in the United States. And so as long as you work hard and study for that test to do well for it, that will enhance your opportunities to get in there. So whether you go here, I'm at in Maryland right now, to Howard Junior College, and then go to Towson University, if you can do well on the GRE, the graduate test for grad school, or on the MCAT, the test that you use to get in med school, you should be good to go. And then once you're there, same kind of thing. You know, it's medical school, for example, is 4 years. Grad school is usually 3 to 6, depending again on what type of degree you're actually pursuing. Others can talk about that better. I did a doctorate degree, a PhD thing in education, while I had to take those prerequisites to get into med school, because it was like, what if I don't get into med school? It wasn't because I was smart. It was because it was my backup plan, right? So the whole point is that you can do those. Med school's 4 years. Everybody takes the same exam. Again, to get in, they take the same stuff to finish medical school, no matter where you are in the United States. So then you're equally positioned to go to anywhere else you want to go. I left Texas after all that and then went to Mass General up in Boston, and it was fun. Again, they needed a drummer more than they needed somebody that scored like a particularly better score. And that, again, those things make a difference. So just know that those things are really vital as far as like there's so many years, but do well with what you're doing. So after med school, that's 4 years. Then you have 4 years typically of residency. And then for child psychiatry, you have another 2 years that you do with that. So again, it's a fair amount of stuff, but then I'm telling you, you can go anywhere on planet Earth. So the amount of freedom that it provides you for working hard on the front end is well worth it. All right, I'll cease and desist there, and I'll move it back over to, I'll go backwards. I'll go with Michael this time.
You know, one of the things that I have found about my degree, which I've got to be honest, was not intentional, is that there is an advantage to a degree in having a master's in social work. And what I mean by that is that as having a master's degree in social work, having my clinical license allows me to become a professor, an assistant professor, which is the lowest level of professor. I had no idea when I was in school that this would be an added benefit of this particular degree. And so it's considered a terminal degree, and I don't have a PhD, but yet I can earn the title as I did at LSU, at the medical school there, to be a faculty. The VA for the longest time would only hire social workers. That's not to downplay the wonderful marriage and family therapists that I've worked with, and I think they are in their own way becoming, getting their degrees to where that can happen. But I just wanted to share that the one unique thing about my MSW, it has allowed me things that some of my colleagues are like, well, why just social workers? I have no idea. But it's considered a terminal degree, and it allows you to have that extra step. But in saying that, it's about the individual, and it's about the work that they want to do. And so as Jeff and Shai have shared with you and Carla, you know, the path and the work it takes some time, and you have to be committed. But I will also say that through working with such wonderful people, I've learned so much more than what I learned in those classrooms. And so I don't know if I should say that, but you get through the class to show competency at a certain level. And then the real work begins when you're doing actual work, being supervised and talking to others. It really is an experience of learning the craft through associating with other professionals and learning what is new, what is relevant, and what is important.
Mike, I'm going to jump in really quickly and ask two things. One, Irma asked, what is a terminal degree? I'm happy to piggyback off of whatever you say. Two, could you talk about the process of becoming a clinical social worker? Because I know that requires some additional training.
And so a terminal degree is one that, like a PhD or an MD, is that there is a PhD in social work that you can obtain for research. PhDs are usually more research focused, and I think you went over that, Shai or Carla, one of the two. And PsyDs are more, I guess it was Gia, PsyDs are more for the clinical work or working with individuals. So when you have the title of clinical social worker, there is a licensing process that is a national process. It's one of those processes where it can be overwhelming. A lot of people on their first attempt do not pass the exam. I took it twice, for example. I know people who have taken it 7, and one person who took it 12 times, and he is now a licensed clinical social worker. And he was always someone that I looked up to and respected and learned a lot from. And so I hope this answers the question, is that to have a clinical licensed social worker usually is synonymous with a social worker who has a license and is able to do diagnosis. And if there are moments of having people who need to go into care, you can sign those papers as well.
You. So as I said, I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist, and that's a 2-year. So my master's was a 2-year program. It was very, 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 very intense. It was like 4 years worth of stuff in 2 years straight through, like every semester throughout the calendar year. And then after that, I went immediately into the PhD. PhDs can take, I mean, I think you can get a PhD in as little as 3 years, as Boz said. Yeah, I'd agree with Boz's numbers, 3 to 6 years. I did mine in 4, so I was in grad school for 6 years total. I think, was there anything else as part of your question, Annie? Like, just how we got with the.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, just your experience with education. And Carla, just if you have anything to add about the education in your role.
Yes, I'm gonna try to be quick in this one. Well, my experience is, I was very clueless when I started in college. I started very young. At the time, I was the first one in my family going into college. So I had no idea about what being a psychologist would be requesting of me or requiring from me. So when I finished my bachelor degree, that was 4 years, I knew that that was not enough to practice psychology, at least in Puerto Rico. So I went straight to do a doctorate program of 5 years. And after that, I got my license to practice psychology in Puerto Rico, but then I moved to Georgia. And that's another story. I had to do a postdoctoral fellowship and take all the tests, the national test, a law test, and also a oral test in front of the board in order to acquire my license to practice here in Georgia. I had to complete a dissertation. I am a PsyD, psychology, like clinical psychologist, but I have in the university that I went, they require us to complete the dissertation.
Great, thank you. And yeah, we have a question in the chat here before we move on, just if anybody could speak a little more on what additional opportunities are available for those that pursue a master's in clinical social work versus an MSW, if anyone's able to do that.
Okay. And so part of the answer to that is that you need an MSW in order to be a clinical social worker. And so MSW is the Masters of Social Work. And then the clinical part involves doing supervision, where you actually sit down with clients for, depending on the state where you are, 2 years to, some are doing a lot more than that. It's been 25 plus years since I did my supervision. But as I mentioned, that's really where you learn the art of what we do. And I think it's really an art. When you think about, we all have pretty much the same training. And I mean that you can divide that by social workers, psychologists, or psychiatrists. People have the same training, but it's how do you apply that training? And that's the art of what we're talking about. And so the short answer is that a Master's of Social Work is the degree. Clinical social worker means that you've completed clinical supervision and you have met the standard to earn the title of clinical licensed social worker or licensed clinical social worker.
And moving on, the benefits in your roles, if anybody could talk about opportunities for training or continued learning, what the PTO is like, just any of the kind of perks that might be included in your roles. And Shai, maybe if you could start.
Happy to start. Boz, back me up if I miss anything. So in the academic medical setting that I'm in, so we're both at Georgetown, we get 6 weeks of vacation time, paid time off. Obviously medical benefits, vision, dental, what other benefits are important? Oh, we have money set aside for professional development. So when we need to renew our licensures, or when we need to take CEUs, or if there are just other like trainings and things that we want to do, we have money set aside for that. That's what's coming to mind. Boz, am I missing anything?
No, and it's like several $1,000s to like be able to get money to go to like the regular annual meeting of like marriage and family therapists or child psychiatrists or whatever, wherever it is. So you can go to the meeting and stay there and pay for it and all that. So the institutions are typically pretty good to support that.
Agreed. And that I will say that that's a benefit of working at a larger institution. That's different than if you have your own private practice, because it's when it's just you in private practice, it is just you. Whatever you need to pay for is coming out of your business expenses. And there are pros and cons to both of those settings, but when you work at a bigger institution, you get these types of perks.
Thank you. And Mike or Carla, anything to add about any of the opportunities available in your positions?
Yes, we have PTO. We also have training and license fees covered by the organization and medical insurance. Most federal holidays are also covered, and lots of training. Paid training. I love those.
You know, I think my three colleagues have said just about everything there is to say about that. Is that, you know, there are the benefits that institutions that employ us give us. And then the other part of that is just that at a university, life is a little different than that of corporate America. And what I mean by that is that I guess you could say a think tank, or there are certainly pressures if you're trying to get funding so that you can ensure the work of yourself and others. A lot of pressure. That pressure is usually lived through the point of actually sending off your application or your grant proposal. But and then you may have pressures of writing papers so that for publication. But the pressures of day to day, we got to get this grind up, we got to get that. I've always found at university that it's a little different in that people respect your commitment to your work, and there's not the pressures that I have a wife who is a medical social worker, and her pressures are, when are we getting this patient out? You know, daily. It's a grind of meeting Medicaid and all these insurance obligations. This work is a little different than that, and I really appreciate it. And I have friends and families that actually laugh at me at times because I suppose I don't do a good job of explaining that, yes, I do have pressures in there, and the work is to a degree it is challenging at times, but I love it. And so it's university work is quite different, and clinical private practice is different in that you can set the pace of how often people are coming in and what time you need to reset yourself and do your own self-care, which is something that is a huge value in this work. And one of the benefits is that the organization values self-care unlike any other place I've ever been.
And how did you all know that this position was for you? Was it a position that fell into your lap? Was it something that you were actively seeking out your specific role? Or maybe you had a mentor who helped you find where you ended up along the way? What was the path to get there? And then the aha moment once you knew that this was what you wanted to do?
I wasn't looking for this position, the position that I hold right now. It was just an opportunity that appeared. The person reached out to me, asking me for if I knew a person, a clinical psychologist that would be able to solve for the organization, but the person has to be bilingual. And I said, well, probably this is the chance for me to try something new and to be more involved with the community. So I made a switch. But I was not looking at that time. So that's my experience.
Yeah.
Just came to me.
No, that's how.
Of course, I always have something to add. So the first thing is medical school is easy. That is in the sense that for 2 years, all you do is go to class. And at the end of the 2 years, you got to pass the test and then go to the next part where you go to the clinical part. Like Mike said, this is real important. Not everybody nails the test the first time. So don't freak out that I'm like, oh my God, my life will be defined by how I do on one test. And I don't know if I'll be able to sleep that night or that month or that year. No, if you do poorly on the test, they have some number you have to do, then you just retake it. And that's not infrequent or uncommon. So it's not that big of a deal. Okay. So you do that. And then in medical school, the second 2 years, that is years 3 and 4, you do 2 months of pediatrics and 2 months of psychiatry and so forth and so on, several months of surgery, etc. I was going to be an OB-GYN. That's what my plan was when I went to medical school. I'm going to work with young women who are happy and they're healthy and they're going through a really blessed moment in their lives, and that'll be fun. And the first night I was on call, we had to deliver 6 babies in 1 hour, and it was me and one other person. It was like, this is not fun at all. And the women were screaming at me, going like, I can't believe somebody like this got me like pregnant. And I was like, I hate all you men. It's like, this is not working out the way I thought it was going to work out. But during the 2 months that I also did psychiatry, it was like, this is easy. It just made sense to me. And my best friend, who's now from medical school, who's now a plastic surgeon, he was like, he couldn't make any sense out of it. And he thought psychiatry was crazy. But when I got to surgery, they're like, keep Boz away from the sharp, pointy objects. Let him like write the notes. He's just not the guy you want like cutting on people, which was true. So the point is you find where you fit. So that's part of it. My better story is in 2004, I was at Mass General. I'd been there right since the late 90s. I've been there about 5 or 6 years. And I get a call and they're like, hey, can you come down to Fort Myers and see some of our guys on the Red Sox team? And I'm like, all right. So I go down and I see some people that are like well-known guys. I don't know anything about baseball, so I don't know that they're famous or not. So anyway, I see people and then they're like, can you see some more? I'm like, all right. So I'm down there. So I do all this work. And then I go up and I'm like, why are you calling me? I'm a freaking child psychiatrist. We got a bunch of smart adult psychiatry people in Boston. Why aren't you using them? And I swear to God, I'm not making this up. They looked up and they said, we've already been through the smart people. We don't need a smart guy. We need somebody from Texas. They like, look at the freaking roster. All the guys are from Georgia and Texas and Louisiana, all that kind of stuff around there. Do you know anything about troll motors? I'm like, of course I know what a troll motor is. They're like, do you know the difference between a 16 gauge gun and a 12 gauge gun or like a different kinds of problems? I'm like, of course, I grew up around that stuff because I was from Texas, right? So here's the point. I still have prideful identity in Texas, and you should too. When I got to Mass General, again, I got there because of music stuff or whatever else. It wasn't popular. I was the first guy from Texas they'd ever had in their child psychiatry training program, and not everybody was happy about that. In fact, I looked back later and saw some of the reviews on me when people interviewed me, and they're like, oh my holy God, you can't be serious about bringing this guy on. We don't know if he married his sister or his cousin or both. This guy's not ever going to fit in here and like be okay. But it was fine. It took a while to like get a place there. So certainly that was not the level of quote discrimination that many of you have had to face and conquer. But still, it was different. However, down the road, it was like, well, we need somebody who's like got this other kind of skill set. So having prideful identity of whatever you come from, whatever kind of adversities you've had to like go through, don't forget that. And that's not always going to be like a bad thing. It is going to come back to be beneficial at like crazy times where things fall in your lap. And so that's the important thing. I do need one caveat. The Red Sox is not, it's not a team of mentally ill people. Okay. I've worked with them from 2004 to 2016 when I moved down to Georgetown. The point was mental health has changed. It's not just about working with people who are ill. It's working with people to like get them tuned up, get performance stuff like optimized so that they can do better. So the stigma has really diminished in the last 20 years. Every baseball team in Major League Baseball has a psychiatrist involved. Every team in the NFL has one in the locker room once per week, as put in by the NFL. Hockey does it, the NBA does it. So it's like mental health has really changed. It's not all about just working with like sick stuff like people may have seen like in movies and whatnot. All right, I'll cease and desist there and pass it back over to Mike this time.
Okay, thanks, because I was kind of biting at the bit when you started talking about I guess, what people perceive. And one of the things that I have learned is as a man doing early childhood mental health work, it's this is our fraternity, Jeff and I pretty much, and there are a couple other members that, we have at Georgetown who are men, but I really, when I think about what my legacy will be, one of them is that I hope that Michael made working with young children cool or cooler. How do we recruit more men into the industry of working with young children and babies specifically. It's something that I feel that it's part of baked into who I am. I was lucky enough to have a dad and uncles who were always gathered around and doing the baby work. And so I think I saw the model as a child, and then certainly as a young man, seeing men who were really vested in doing the work helped form who I am. How I got here, it's one of those things where I was doing a program here in Texas, and I thought about a colleague, Dr. Neil Horn, and said, hey, can you come do a presentation? He was like, oh, you're in Texas now, because I had been traveling a lot. And he was like, sure. He did the presentation. Now, we do a lot of, we used to do a lot of conferences where we would travel. And one of the biggest joys was not so much the meetings, but after the meetings, being able to go to dinner. And it's almost like a fellowship, to use another term, of being able to sit around the table with people and talk about the work. And that is, to me, one of the joys of doing this work. But at the same time, one of the challenges is that how do we get more men interested in this work? I don't think I saw any other men other than Jeff and myself. I may have missed the faces, but it's a wonderful career choice, and you make a difference. And it does have its benefits while you're doing the clinical work. Sometimes you have to win people over. I had a young couple that they were like, you're not like most men that we are used to being around. But at the end, the help that I was able to give their son was just, so rewarding. And so, yeah, it's one of the challenges. For me personally, is finding or having more colleagues who are men.
Great, thank you. And I think that's kind of the perfect segue into what are some of the challenges that you've all encountered in your positions and in the overall field? And if you have encountered those obstacles, those challenges, those things that you still see need to be changed, how have you overcome that and worked against it? And Shai, maybe I could start with you.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is in the mental health field, I think psychiatry and psychology are considered, they are the oldest of the mental health options. And as a marriage and family therapist, it's been, and I think maybe Mike can resonate with this, although social work has also been around for a long time, marriage and family therapy is among the newer fields, maybe about 50 years old or so. And so it requires a lot of advocacy to get, depending on where you are in the country, to help people understand exactly what we do and how we're unique from the other mental health professions. When you go to somewhere like California, I think MFTs outnumber everybody else, but that's very specific to California. And in the rest of the country, we're much more dispersed. So I think having to advocate and explain what we do and how we're different has been a barrier, but it's also an opportunity to educate and inform, which I appreciate. I think a lot of us appreciate. On a more day-to-day level, I think that my biggest challenge working in an academic medical center and having the clinic on site and seeing people from the community is that we cannot operate like a private practice, meaning that we can't see people long-term. And having worked in private practice for several years, while I was working on my PhD, I really, really, really value the opportunity to see people through all sorts of big life changes that unfold over the years and to establish that long-term connection with them. And so I think the short-term model that we adopt in our clinic for very reasonable reasons, right? Like we have to be able to cycle people through. We have to be able to meet and touch as many people as we can. They just can't, if everyone in our department is constantly full, then we just don't get to impact as many lives. And being a community-based clinic where we take insurance and we want everyone who has the capacity to show up show up. We just have to make sure that we have openings. There's a lot of benefits to the short-term model. I think it's just one of the things that I have found difficult coming from a long-term model. And I think in terms of how to overcome that, I think it really is just a reframe and shifting the way that you look at it and saying, yes, even though the work that I do with any given person is short term, maybe 3 months or 12 sessions, I do in the end get to help more people than if I were in private practice and constantly full and not able to get as more new people in the door as I am able to in my work at Georgetown.
Okay, so barriers or challenges in this role. I will answer based on my experience. So that's working with Hispanics and Latinx families. The barriers that I see is not having a big pool of referrals, sources. Our community, there's a scarcity of clinicians or professionals in the mental health field that are able to cover those needs. So the barrier that I see is first not having enough people that I can collaborate in giving those services, and also probably not all the barriers for our clients, for our patients. They're not being able to have the financial resources to pay for services or to find services that are appropriate for their needs, or just not having the knowledge of what is available in the community. So that's one of the barriers. Let's say challenge, I would say that goes along with the barriers. So that's what comes to my mind right now. If I have another thing to say, I will interrupt the conversation.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, Jeff, if there's any barriers or challenges in your position.
Put them in the chat box. So I'll pass it over to Mike.
I think they've pretty much have been covered. I again, one of the things I think that is a challenge, but it's one that we're certainly working on as an institution, is defining who we are and what we do. And Dr. Porter said a little bit about that, is that the example of the LMTFs, how do you get the public to fully understand the benefits of the array of services that are available, but also, and I'll just go out and say it, we're living in a time right now where communities are trying to define what is good mental health as something that perhaps they don't want. And so when we think about how we address issues such as diversity and inclusion, it's more difficult now than it has been. But I think as an institution where we are providing resources, we have to be able to figure out how to do that. If you're in a state, for example, where certain words will eliminate the ability to do a training or attend a training, you know, how do we do that? How do we do what we do, which has its foundations in being empathetic, regardless of who you are working with? And I say it like that because I've worked with people in a number, you know, with parents who have had charges of child abuse on them. And one of the beauties in supervision is working with people who have done that work, and they help you understand that they too have a story. And the same empathy that you give to that child, understanding the story and history of that parent is equally important. And it's those types of things. And so I would say that challenge is making sure that we are able to deliver helpful strategies and products such as trainings like this that everyone can attend, and doing it and claiming the language that we use as being appropriate and just.
At this point, yeah, I'd just like to invite everybody to unmute yourself if you're comfortable and ask a question.
Early on, you mentioned that sometimes when you have a lot of success and experience, sometimes you switch over to administration. And I wanted to ask, and this could be for everyone as well, how do you kind of keep your hands in the field? Because, you know, that's where you guys started and that's where your love really lies. And I've heard sometimes when you go to administration, you lose that hands-on work. So I was wondering like how you create that balance for yourself.
I maybe should clarify. I'm in an academic medical setting, but I am still seeing patients directly. And so I've not moved fully over into administration. But I can speak a bit to that challenge because it is real, the challenge of moving away from direct patient contact and going into like a paperwork and people management realm. I don't know that I could ever do that because the most joy I get from anything is affecting lives and creating relationships with people and helping them thrive and seeing them flourish. So that's not a sacrifice that I've made. It's not one that I anticipate making ever. But if other people have experience with that, either at some points in their lives going into full admin, I'd love to hear that. Thanks for the question, Irma.
2 cents. I've watched people do that where they go fully into administration, and I got to say, woof. I'm biased. I think it's really wise to do what Shat said, which is no matter what you do, make sure that you hold on to some regular clinical work, or else you tend to lose that skill set. Same as if you don't do something that you're used to doing, and then you get proficient at maybe being a good administrator, but you start losing like touch with doing the clinical kind of care. So I would try to hold on to a block of it.
Thank you both. Is it okay to ask one more? I know there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you guys want to take that one first.
No, go ahead. Yeah, ask away. I'll get that next.
Okay. So this is I hope I can put this into words. So my question is, I do want to become an LMFT. So Dr. Shai, I'm hoping to pursue what you're doing. My question is more what would be your advice for non-neurotypical individuals that want to pursue this field, but they have attention disorders. So being in meetings a long time doesn't work. And I know that you should be advocating for yourself, but I think it's different, like advocating for it and then also being able to fully do it, like be in a meeting space and stay like, have your attention fully there. What would be your recommendation?
Yeah. First of all, thrilled to hear that you're thinking about pursuing this. Awesome. I will answer this question, but also feel free to reach out to me. Happy to meet and chat one-on-one if you'd like to. I think that, so one, of course, advocating for yourself is critical and making sure that you have whatever accommodations you need. Schools and programs are legally obligated to make sure that they give you the accommodations that you need. I will also say that the cool thing about the training for being an MFT, depending on where you go, of course, and actually the work of all clinical work is that it can be so varied and diverse. So if it's hard for you to sit in a lot of meetings, like administrative meetings in particular, then you can limit those. You have a lot of flexibility there. The thing, I don't know if you are equating meetings to sessions, because a clinical session is at least 45 minutes, and that's something that you just have to be on for. So then we could talk about, ways to make that happen with, the various supports that are available. But I think I'd say the things that require the most concentrated attention are classes when you're in training, and then the actual work of therapy sessions. But I imagine if you want to be a clinician, then you're at least somewhat mentally prepared for sitting in a room with someone for an hour at a time. And like I said, happy to chat more offline if you'd like to, but did that answer the question? It's a bit, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So an LMFT is a licensed marriage and family therapist. I can speak to the LMFT experience, and then Mike, please speak to the social work one. So what makes the MFTs different is the systemic focus and nature of the field. So you go into it because you want to work with couples and or families. And of course, any clinical training program is going to teach you how to work with individuals. But everything that we do is viewed through the systems lens. So we understand that any given person doesn't operate alone. They're always impacted by their context, by their environment, by the people around them. So the work that we do and the way that we conceptualize the work that we do takes into account all of those things. And I think I mentioned earlier that I have been obsessed with romantic relationships for basically my whole life. So as you can imagine, my partner is loves that. I dig into all sorts of relationship stuff all of the time, personally and professionally. And so I knew that I wanted to help people maximize their happiness and satisfaction in their relationships. I strongly think that relationships are the cornerstone of life. Like if we don't have good relationships, whether with our partner, our family, our friends, we're just not happy. So I wanted to make sure that I could do my part in making sure that people establish and thrive in the relationships that they're in. And so really, it all boils down to taking into account people's relational context and their environmental context, and really helping 2+ people in the room sort things out. What I've heard from people trained in other mental health careers is that the idea of having more than one person in the room is very anxiety inducing. Like, how do I manage 2 people? But that's something that we get trained on immediately. Like we start with multiple people in the room, and that is a very specific and unique skill set. And I think it served me really well. And again, you also get lots of training with individuals, so you're not missing out on anything from another field. Hope I did that justice. Go ahead, Mike.
You know, you did for me as a social worker, because I got to tell you that angst that I have when, okay, I got to do a couple right now, and I'm going to have 2 people in the room and all of those things has always been very real. I, through my supervision and other trainings, have been able to learn that skill. But I think back to what was most angst producing in the first years of my career, that would certainly be towards the top of the list. Now, when you talk about social work and what a social work program consists of, usually towards the end of each social work program, if you're going for a master's in social work, there are 3 tracks that people have. Some schools may have 4 tracks. One is administrative planning and organization, APO, which you focus on hitting a social service organization, for example. Then there's a clinical track, which is what it implies. You focus on doing clinical work. And then there's a substance abuse track that many schools will offer. And so as an MSW, a newly minted MSW, many times you will say, I am an MSW who graduated in one of these 3 or 4 tracks. And from there, it's about where do you want to go? The clinical people, a lot of them will take jobs working for Child Protective Services, or they will take jobs at universities or clinics, honing their skills as clinicians. And some will take that track wanting with the end result of hanging a shingle and being able to see people in private practice. And so APO, what it implies is that they have all of the general social work training and values, but they are really geared toward administrative and team leadership type roles. And then the substance abuse, again, what it implies is that you are really going to dive into the skill set needed to be a good substance abuse counselor. And so that, I think, is what sets the MSW program up, is that it's track-based often, and that you can choose. Now, what often happens is that after you are out, I was an APO person, but I found my joy in clinical work. And so, you know, it's about experiences. Just like Jeff shared about, you know, his post residency experiences, how, you know, you get exposed to something and it's like, wow, this is where I belong.
Yes, we're getting confirmation that definitely answered the question. So before I throw it back to Victoria, just to close it out on the NTAC side, just wondering if everybody could maybe just, you know, offer one kind of parting line of advice for those that might be interested in pursuing a career as a mental health clinician. And Carla, if it's okay to start with you, just anything that you could offer people to take with them.
Well, you don't have to be sure from the beginning that this is what you wanted to do. You learn in the process, you learn to love the profession in the process, and I don't know. I would say that if you really want to be involved in the growth and improvement of mental health in our communities, go through this path. It will be very worth it.
One parting line.
Self-doubt is normal and it's something that we all have. And you are looking at the end result of what people have done, the paths that people have chosen to get to where we are. But I can guarantee you that we all have had moments of, can I do this? Am I going to be able to do this? Is it worth it? And it's about perseverance. And I can tell you, if not you, there will be others, and they may not be as on top of things as you, but what they have is the perseverance. And so Southern University in New Orleans, a small historically Black university. How did I get here? It was because I had the self-doubt, but I also had people that would shore me up, and I listened to them. And so find your communities, get the support, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, so Irma was the brave one, right? And the whole thing is this: we all fit on a continuum. It's like you don't have ADHD or not, you don't have depression or anxiety or not, all that kind of stuff. It's like, where do you fit on that continuum? So whatever you have, like, oh, I struggle with attention or whatever, don't let that be a deterrent to you doing these things that you want to do to show the passion and the perseverance that Mike alluded to. It's like you can work with and will work with supervisors and with your colleagues who will say, yeah, you didn't feel like you were engaged or participating. And if you're open, you'll be able to like do what you need to do to figure out how to make that work. And so don't let any of those kind of things ever hold you back.
Thank you. And Shai.
I will bring us home. I have two things. One, mentorship is critical. So the fact that you're here today is huge. And keep talking to people who are doing the things that you want to do, who are doing things that aren't what you want to do, just to make sure you like feel all the other options out. I talked to so many professors. I talked to so many professionals when I was in undergrad, when I was in high school, when I was in grad school. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to connect with other people. Again, that relationship building, and just get their insight. I mean, it helps you figure out like, okay, understanding their day-to-day, that's not what I want to do. Or, wow, what they're describing is exactly what I want to do. So just find some mentors and latch on to them. The other thing is, if you are interested in going into mental health, I highly recommend getting your own therapy. It is critical to know what it's like to be on the other side of the couch or the therapy chair. And it'll make you a better clinician. And honestly, as Boz said earlier, everyone can use at least a tune-up from time to time. So find someone who is a good fit, who feels really good to work with, and stick with them. And even if you only see them like once a month for maintenance therapy, that's great. But highly, highly, highly recommend that. Otherwise, thanks everybody.
Thank you all for everything. It's been a pleasure having dialogue with you. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Victoria.
Thanks, Annie. I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude to every single person on this panel today. With that said, thank you all very, very much, and take very good care. We appreciate everything that you've done for this series. Thanks everyone for attending.